Today I'm going to show you how to create this concrete texture procedurally. You can put it on different objects, and here's what the nodes will look like when we're finished. Thanks very much to my patrons. I love you all. If you want to become a patron or support me on Gumroad, you can. I have all my tutorial blend files on Patreon, as well as some cool scenes that I've built over the years. You can do this in Eevee or cycles, it doesn't really matter, but I like using cycles a little bit better, so I'm going to change to that. Feel free and follow along with Eevee. So I'm going to switch over there and also do experimental for the feature set to get access to the adaptive subdivision and the subsurface modifier. And I'm going to change the GPU compute as well. It's just a bit faster for my system. Don't worry if you don't have that option. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to change the noise threshold under render to 0.1 to get a much faster render without sacrificing too much quality. I'm going to hit Control 4 to put a subsurface modifier on here. We can see it if you go to the modifiers panel. I'm just going to hit Control A to apply that modifier. I'm also going to put a cast modifier because this isn't actually a perfect sphere yet. I'm going to change the factor to 1 and Control A to apply that as well. I'm going to hit W or right click to bring up this context menu as well and just go shade smooth. I'm going to bring in an HDRI lighting setup. So I'm going to go into rendered mode so I can see what's happening by holding down Z, moving my mouse upwards. And let's go to the world properties. Next to color, it's got this yellow circle. Click that, open up environment texture, and then open. Navigate to where you've got some HDRIs. I've got some free ones from Polyhaven. So I'm going to go to Kaylee Interior 1K. Click on that, and it's in the background and it's lighting our object. I'm going to remove it from the background by opening up Ray Visibility and unclicking Camera. I'm going to split my screen here and change the left side to the shader editor. Hit N to get rid of that shelf on the right there, and then in the 3D viewport, you can hit T to get rid of that shelf on the left. I'm going to hit Shift A and then click on Search and type TC, hit Enter. You'll get a texture coordinate node. And I'm going to hold down Control, Shift, and left click to get a preview going. We can get the preview out of Object there. And that's a Node Wrangler shortcut, so if it's not working, you just need to go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, start typing in Node, and just make sure there's a check mark right here. So I'm going to close that up there. And yeah, we're coming out of Object, and I'm going to bring in a mapping node, place it right here. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to make 5 different shapes and then just add them together to create our final pattern. So let's start with the first shape. I'm going to create a reroute by holding down Shift and right-clicking and dragging through here. Then I can move these around and get a bit more organized. I'm going to hit Shift A and search and just search for a noise texture. Bring that in and bring in a mix RGB and place it right here. I'm going to plug from this reroute into color 2. And now this mix RGB here is kind of a controller for how much influence this noise texture has. If it's all the way to the right, this noise texture has no influence. And if it's all the way to the left, it's like this mix RGB isn't even here. And this noise texture is just here by itself. So this is just like a gauge of how much noise we kind of let into our pattern. So I'm going to set this at 0.8, so we're not letting that much noise in. 0.99 would be like almost no noise. And let's change the scale here to 11 and the detail to 4. So then I'm going to bring in a Voronoi pattern, place it right here, and we can see the different inputs here. Distance is this black and white pattern, and color is all these different colors. Position, more colors. We're going to use distance and color here. So I'm going to run a color ramp out of each one of those. Just grab it and duplicate it with Shift D. And then I'll run it just like this here. So now we've got this pattern and this pattern. On the top color ramp here, let's take a look. I'm going to bring the black up to 0.15. And then I'm going to change the shade here. I'm just going to choose a different hex code here. So just type in here. It's going to be E5, E5, E5. When it's the same 2 digits over and over again, like that, like letters or numbers, then it's going to be a gray color. So this is almost white. And then this white here, we're just going to bring this flag down to 0.28. So you can see these subtle blotches coming through here. This bottom color ramp, I'm going to change the interpolation to constant. If we move this black down, we can kind of see what's happening. It's masking more or less of this out. So we're going to use this bottom color ramp to mask out this top color ramp and only let some of these splotches through, I guess. So I'm going to bring in a mix RGB, place it right here. This is going into the color one, the top color ramp is, and then this bottom color ramp is going to go into the factor. We're going to change this bottom color to white. So now if we drag this along, this is the most shapes coming through, and this is going to be like the least shapes coming through. So somewhere in the middle is going to be pretty good. Maybe let's go at like 0.35. So let's just label some things real quick. I'm just going to grab that node, hit Control J, and let's name this the mask. And then let's grab everything in this branch here, Control J. We'll just name this as small shapes. You can call them small splotches or small blotches or whatever. Doesn't really matter. I'm also going to change the color of this bottom node here. I guess that's pretty good. The gray stands out. You can change it to any color you want. Grab any of these. Oh, and I learned recently that if you click anywhere here, you can't actually grab it. I like that feature a bit better. You got to grab the top here by clicking on the title or anywhere along that top area. Okay, on to shape 2. I'm going to make another reroute here. We'll just kind of view it coming out of that reroute. And that's going to go into a noise texture. So I'll bring that in here, make another reroute where I can feed other noise textures from. We'll grab this one here and actually go just Control-Shift-D to make a new one, but still attached to that original node output there. And then we'll bring in a color ramp, and we'll put this on the bottom one. It's just going to go factor into factor. I'm going to bring the black up to 0.43, and the white is going to come down to 0.67. And this is going to be a mask for how much this pattern comes through. So I'm going to bring in a mix RGB, place it right here. This is automatically going into the socket I wanted, color 1. And I'm going to bring this color amp and feed it into this factor. And we're going to leave color 2 as hex code BC, BC, BC. I'm going to move all this down here and actually grab this noise texture. And let's Control-Shift-D it one more time as well, because we're going to use this in a mask to mask out this bottom area. I'm going to grab this color ramp, and we'll just go factor to factor. And I'm going to change the black to 0.33, and the white is going to be at 0.63. For this noise texture here, let's just change the detail to 4 and the roughness to 1. So it's a lot more grainy now. I'm going to grab this mix RGB, place it right here, and this mix RGB is going to go into color 1, while this color amp is going to go into the factor here. So if we look at this, these splotches are kind of coming in now. They're more grainy, but they're a little bit bigger than those first ones. Let's adjust these two noise textures as well. So this one here, I'm just going to put the scale to 1.7. So now these areas are much bigger, and there's these white areas as well. So I'm going to select everything here and hit Control J, and I'm just going to call this medium shapes. So I'm just going to select that, hit F2, medium shapes. And again, you can call this whatever you want, as long as it's easier for you to tell what that name means. We can also label these as masks, so Control J and Control J. And let's just grab these and change the color. Even if we just select the color option, then it'll change to that gray color, which is very easy to stand out against that black background. And let's just call this a mask, and again, mask. So we've created 2 out of the 5 shapes so far, those small shapes and those medium shapes. Why don't we add these together? And to do that, I'm going to bring in a simple math node and change it from add to multiply by opening that up and hitting M. And I'm going to attach that to the bottom one. And now, we've added them together. We could also use add. There's nothing wrong with that. But the values are going to be much lighter there. So I prefer the multiply method there. You just have to worry about, not making things too dark at first, because every time it multiplies, it's going to get a smaller and smaller number, which can be closer and closer to black. Start making that third shape. I'm going to grab everything here, those reroutes as well. Just move it all up and Control Shift left click here. I'm going to bring in a noise texture, and let's bring in a color ramp as well. Place it here, move these over a little bit, make it a reroute. And actually, I'll do the same thing down here. I'll just grab both of these, Control Shift D, and I'm going to bring in a mix RGB, and it's going to go on this guy here, going into color 1, and this top color ramp is going to go into the factor, and this color is going to be white. For this top noise texture, I'm going to change the scale to 2 and the detail to 4. In this bottom one, I'm going to change the scale to 10 and the detail to 4. And this top color ramp, let's change this black flag to 0.24, and the white flag is going to come down to 0.48. Then I'm going to change this black color to something a little bit lighter. It's going to be hex code 808080. So kind of a medium gray there. And this bottom color ramp here, let's change this black flag to 0.52 and the white to 0.68. So there we go. There's our third set of splotches there. I'm going to grab all these, Control J, what do we name this? Large shapes. And we could group all of these if you wanted and call them all like large splotches or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to multiply these together, and now we've got all 3 shapes contributing. I'm going to label this top color ramp as well as mask, so Control J, grab that guy, hit N. I'm going to change it to color, and let's also go F2, just call it mask. So it's pretty easy to identify everything that's going into these factors. Those are the masks, but it's nice to label them anyways, just to make it a little clearer. I'm going to make some cracks now, so let's make the 4th shape. I'm going to grab a reroute, just bring it down here, and another one as well. Let's grab a noise texture, place it right here, and I'm going to Control-Shift-D this as well. For this bottom noise texture, this is going to go into a mix RGB and then a Voronoi. And I'm going to feed this reroute right here into color 2 so that this mix is a controller for how much noise texture we're letting through here. So the noise texture is going to be 9 for the scale and 6 for the detail. So pretty detailed on this one. And the mix RGB is going to be 0.9, so we're not really letting that much of the noise through. And we're going to come out of the, I'm actually going to change this distance to edge, so we're going to come out of the distance, which is the only option on this node, and go into a color ramp, which is going to be, the white is just going to come way down to 0.001, so very thin lines here. I'm going to change the Voronoi scale to 1, so these cracks are much larger. And out of this noise texture, let's go into a color ramp. And this is going to go into a mix RGB. This is going to go into color 1 there. And then this color ramp up here is going to go into the factor there. So, and then color 2 is going to be white. So this is our mask right here. And I'm going to change the color ramp as well. Bring the black up to 0.29. And the white will bring down to maybe 0.43 or slightly higher maybe. Depends how much of those cracks you want to show through. Maybe 0.45, something like that. Looks pretty good. Let's label this as large cracks. Control J, F2, large cracks. And this right here is our mask. I guess we're just labeling the color ramp as the mask. We could also label this noise texture as a mask too, because that does change the settings quite a lot if you adjust that. Let's go N and change it to color. So let's multiply this together here. Come out of multiply, duplicate that, and we'll just drag this over to connect. On this large cracks here as well, I'm going to change something about this noise texture right before the color ramp mask. I'm going to change the detail to 4 and the scale to 1. I guess I said that backwards. So scale 1, detail 4. So I like the look of something like this much better. It's just larger areas of the cracks. That's what I actually meant to do anyway. So if we expand this a little bit, you know, it's not as busy. But that looks pretty good at around 0.45. So let's create this last branch here, and this is going to be small cracks. So I'm going to create a reroute, move it down here, and let's bring in a noise texture. And I'm just going to Control-Shift-D that as well. And this top one is going to go into a color ramp. And this bottom one here is going to go into a mix RGB and then a Voronoi. So I'll plug this reroute right here into color 2, and this is going to go into color 1, and it's going to go into a Voronoi. We'll set that Voronoi at distance to edge as well. So let's come out of this Voronoi here, and I'm going to add another color ramp onto here as well. And then this is going to go into a mix RGB, and this bottom one here I've got going into the factor, and this is going to go into color 1, and color 2 is just going to be white. This should actually be switched around. I had that backwards. So this is the mask up here, and this is going to go into color 1. And so this top noise here, let's set this to scale 2. And this top color ramp, let's set the black flag to 0.25. And this top flag we'll bring down to 0.42. This noise down here, let's set the scale to 12 and the detail to 4. And this mix here is going to go to 0.9. And then this Voronoi here, we'll put it to scale 4. We'll see how that looks. And this color ramp right here, we're going to bring this white way down to 0.01. So we can see these cracks are pretty faint. Maybe we want to bring these in a little bit more. Maybe bring the black up to like 0.35 or something like that. I think that still looks pretty cool, and it just shows through a little bit better. So I'm going to grab all of this here, Control J. Let's just rename that as small cracks. And this is our mask. Let's just go ahead and rename that, and I'll keep it inside the frame as well. And we'll just change the color there. Okay, let's add this last part to the pattern. I'm just going to move some stuff around, get out of the way a little bit, and maybe move this down as well. Doesn't need to be so high up there. Bring in one more multiply, drag that over, and drag this over to the bottom socket. And let's see how it looks. We've got our small cracks, our large cracks, and different size splotches. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's coming through, but I guess that white area is probably the medium one. Yeah, there it is. So there you go. I've got 5 different shapes that I just added together with these multiply math nodes. And you know, these noise ones are kind of done in different ways, but every single way there's a mask and there's kind of a pattern set up there. You know, there's the mask there, there's another mask, and the pattern is coming through from this noise texture here. So I'm going to feed this into a color ramp, and let's just feed this into the base color on the principled BSTF and see what that looks like. So I'm going to create some bump maps here, and you kind of have to decide what you want to come through on your bump information there. And I figured, you know, probably should have the 2 cracks and maybe this large shapes as well. That's just a very subtle thing, but might look kind of cool. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to bring in a bump node and just place it right here and feed this large shapes into the height information. Let's just see what that looks like. So you can see, you know, it's pretty strong. Let's turn that down to like 0.1 or something like that. That looks a little bit better. And we can also see, you know, maybe we want a bit more detail right here on the edge. We could drag one of these up and see if that increases the detail. Maybe that's, it's hard to say. You know, I guess you just decide what you want. You know, maybe you want different scale altogether for that noise. I'm going to grab a second bump node, and I'll just place it here, and I'll place a math node right in front of here as well. You just want to get these 2 you know, multiplied together, and we'll just feed that into height. So there's add, there's multiply. Sometimes it's worth checking out other settings as well just to see what it'll look better, but this looks pretty good. And let's turn that down to like 0.2 or something. We'll feed that, or we'll feed one of these into the other one. What I'll do is I'll just put this up here, and I'll feed this first one into the normal on this second one. Then we have the normal both combined here, and it kind of looks like that second one's coming out. There we go. Didn't mean to click that. And let's feed this into the normal on the principled BSDF and take a look. I feel like even 0.1 might be a little strong for that first bump node. Maybe 0.01 would look a little bit better. I think, I guess it depends on the concrete you're making, but you know, this one doesn't have to be that bad. You can always use the displacement node as well. I guess that's what I was talking about doing earlier with the whole experimental. So why don't we try that out And I will just displace, actually I'll displace both of these guys here. I'll just kind of add them together here. This time I want to do add because I don't want them to be affecting each other. I kind of want them to be more independent there. And let's put this into a displacement node. We'll feed it into the height there. And we'll feed that into the displacement on the end there. And that's not quite displacing it yet. Let's go down to the material. What is this? Material properties, and go to settings and displacement. We'll change that to displacement only or displacement and bump, one of the two. And yeah, now it's displacing it. So you could have it pretty extreme like this. It does look kind of cool. If that's the case, I would probably, I guess, unless you're doing like some really trashed concrete, kind of scale back this mask a little bit, and not have it be like so crazy. But it's totally up to you what you want to do. And if you want it to be less of an effect there as well, you can just kind of put a math multiply on both of these noodles here, and it controls kind of the magnitude of everything. So I'll just set that to 1, and I'll set this to 1 as well. And now we can kind of be like, oh, this crack is a bit big. I don't want it to be like so effective. Let's go to like 0.1 for the crack. Yeah, it's still pretty big, I guess, depending on your needs. But this one here as well, let's go like 0.1. And now it's way more subtle coming through there. You can adjust this mid-level if the size is taken off on you. I'm going to grab these 3 math nodes here and hit Control J, make a frame, and let's call this displacement. And if we want to change anything here, we can change the magnitude of either of these branches or change the displacement overall. You can even turn it off just by going to 0. So you've got these 5 different patterns, and they can all contribute a certain amount. If we wanted to increase the prominence of one, we could come to this color amp, for instance, this gray value here. If we drag this down, you can see it's much darker. It's not really what it was meant to be. It was kind of meant to be like a cloudy, low-res pattern that's just very faint, but we could do it like this if we wanted. We could also change all of these patterns to 4D, and then we have this W value that we can cycle through, and it kind of changes the pattern, but it's generally the same otherwise. So we could do that to any of the noise or Voronoi textures. Okay, that's all for today. Let me know if you have any questions, anything you'd like clarified. Otherwise, thanks for watching.